So let's now work towards the goal of making this button work, so that when we tap it, we navigate to a different screen that shows us these questions, which we can answer. Now for that, we of course need to tweak this function, which is passed as a value to onPressed, because in the end, that is the function, and therefore this here is the code that will be executed when the button is pressed. But what exactly should we do here? Well, in the end, what we want to do here is we want to replace this start screen widget here with a different widget. So that instead of showing start screen inside of our scaffold and container here, we show that questions screen, or however we want to name it. So for that, of course, we need a new screen, but then we also need a way of replacing this start screen here with that other screen after this button down here was pressed. So after this function here executed. And for that, to implement this solution, we'll need to dive into a couple of new concepts. To be precise, over the next lectures, you will learn how to render content conditionally and how to lift state up. Now, before we start rendering content conditionally and lifting state up, I'll first of all create two new widgets. I'll create a new widget, which in the end will contain my material app here with all its content, because we'll need that custom widget a little bit later for lifting that state up, but I'll get back to that once we're ready for that. I just want to create the widget for this already. And we'll need another new widget for this questions screen to which we want to switch. So for that, in the lib folder, I'll add a new file called quiz.dart, which should contain this material app here, and another new file, which could be called questions screen.dart. And in both files, new widgets should be created. And of course, to practice what you learned, definitely try building these two widgets on your own first. It should both be stateful widgets, because we will later need these widgets to be stateful. And in the previous course section, you learned how to build stateful widgets. Therefore, definitely try this on your own. In the questions screen widget, you can then simply return some text widget or anything like this. And in the quiz widget, you should return this material app with all its content. You don't need to do anything else with these two widgets. You don't need to import them or use them in other files. Just create them. And after a short pause, which I give you to pause the video and try creating these widgets on your own, I will build them together with you so that you can compare your solution to mine. So, did you succeed? Let's now build these two widgets, and I'll start with the quiz widget in the quiz.dart file. For that, we again use the class keyword, and then I'll name it quiz. Not quiz screen or anything like that, just quiz, because that will basically be my main widget that later manages the entire quiz. And as mentioned, this should be a stateful widget, hence you should extend stateful widget, which is a class provided by Flutter, and therefore, of course, you must import package Flutter material Dart as you learned it. With that, we create this stateful widget, and as you learned in the previous section, when building a stateful widget, you in the end always end up with two classes that must be built. So therefore, besides building this stateful widget class here, we also need a second class, and that will be the quiz state class. The name is generally up to you, but the convention is to use your widget class name and append state, and also add a leading underscore to turn this into a private class, which technically can only be used in this file here, in the quiz.dart file in this case, and not in any other files, because this class, this quiz state class, will be connected to this quiz widget class here soon. So that's why you should name it like this. And this also extends something provided by Flutter, and that something is the state class, which is a generic class though, as you can tell by these angle brackets. And in the end, that simply means that this state class and type is closely connected to another class and type therefore. And to kind of establish this connection, you add these opening and closing angle brackets as you learned it. And between those angle brackets, you have the name of that other type to which this class will be connected in the end. And here, that's the quiz widget class. So you add this here, and inside of this quiz state class here, you then must add a build method, which returns a widget, which takes this context argument, and which should also receive this add override annotation. And then in here, you return your widget or a combination of widgets. And as mentioned before, for this quiz widget, that should simply be the material app here. Like this. So I'll cut this here and then go to my quiz widget file and return material app here. Like this. Now in there, I'm using this start screen widget, and therefore I have to bring this import here from the main.dart file into my quiz widget file here, like that. Now with that, we're not done though. That's just the quiz state. That's not everything we have to do. Instead, we now have to go to the quiz widget class here and also add something to that class. And here you should add a create state method, which must return a state value. And state, as mentioned, is a generic type. So here it must also be defined in a generic way. And here you also refer to that quiz widget class, which in the end just says that create state creates an instance of a class that's based on state connected to quiz. So an instance of this quiz state class here in our case. And that's therefore what you should do inside of create state. You should return an instance of this quiz state class by calling the quiz state class constructor. Of course, here we haven't added a constructor function, but as you learned in the previous section, you also don't have to add one. Instead, Dart automatically gives you one if you haven't added a custom one. Now here you should then also add override on create state. And for the quiz widget here, we also then should add a constructor function where you should accept and forward that named key argument and turn this into a const constructor. And that is now this quiz stateful widget. That's the widget class. And then below that, we have the quiz state class, which in its build method returns this material app. So that's the first of the two widgets that should be added. The second widget should be added in the questions screen file here. And there, just as before, you add your class questions screen, which extends stateful widget. And of course here you then also import from package, Flutter, and then there material.dart. And we add our create state method here. And to do this a bit quicker, you can also open this suggestions menu by pressing Ctrl space. And with that create state suggestion selected, if you hit tab, this is added for you. And you just need to replace stateful widget here with questions screen and replace this part inside of create state with the actual code where you create a state. And for that, we need to add that second class, of course, which in this case is called underscore questions screen state, and which extends state connected to questions screen like this. And then, of course, inside of that state class here, you add the build method. And for that, you can also start typing build and then choose this build suggestion, hit tab, and it's added for you. You can get rid of this type annotation in front of context. It's actually not needed here. And then inside of this build method, you just return a widget, for example, the text widget, where you could say questions screen. Like this. And of course, we'll change this later, but it's some good dummy content for now. Inside of create state, you then return an instance of this underscore questions screen state class like this. So you instantiate this class, you create an object based on this class, so to say. And of course, just as before, you should add this constructor function where you get and forward that key argument. And that's these two classes added. Now with them added, I at least want to use the quiz widget which we added in the main Dart file because here I want to output my quiz widget or pass this to run app. And I can do that since inside of that quiz widget, I am of course using material app. So in the end, by using my custom widget here and passing it to run app, I still use this material app, just wrapped into my custom widget here. And for this quiz widget to be available here, of course, you also must add an import statement to this main.dart file and import from your own package here, and they are from the quiz.dart file like this. You can then add const here because quiz does have a constant constructor. And if this is now saved and you force the app to reload, you should have the same output as before, but now the app is prepared such that we can start working on this button.